There are moments in every person's life when they face intense adversity. They're crucibles that forge who they become as individuals and as leaders. Now more than ever, we need leaders who are called to a higher standard, focused on leaving it better than they found it, and paying it forward to the next generations. Now, let's join Fire Chief Randy Brugman as he speaks with leaders from all walks of life, as he explores and learns from their personal journeys and the crucibles that have forged them into better leaders and better people.
Well, thanks for joining us on the Leadership Crucible today, and it's an honor to have Marshall Levin on the show today. And let me tell you a little bit about Marshall. His reputation spans the globe and includes senior positions in both the profit and nonprofit sector. Mr. Levin is an honors graduate of Swarthmore College. He holds a Master of Social Science from Bryn, Mawr, a Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research. He was the Executive Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of the American Committee for the Weizmann Institute of Science, where upon his departure, they created an educational endowment fund in his name. A Senior Associate National Director and Director of National Development for the Anti-Defamation League, Mr. Levin served as Executive Director of the Financial Resource Development for UJA-Federation of New York, the Executive Director of Community Planning and Allocations for the Associated Jewish Community, Supervisor of Northern Israel in charge of Crisis Intervention for the Ministry of Social Welfare, and lecturer at the Haifa University School of Social Work and Executive Director of Synagogues in the Conservative and Reform movements. Marshall was also a professional athlete. Marshall, welcome to the Leadership Crucible. It's an honor to have you on the program today.
Well, I'll tell you that the honor is flattering and humbling. I want to applaud what you're doing through the Leadership Crucible and have a comment to share, I'm sure, in the course of our conversation.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, as your bio reflected, you've had just an illustrious career, and you've really made a difference in the lives of other people as you have, walked your journey, and that's what we want to talk a little bit about today. So, if I could take you back to a time when you were involved, playing a major role in helping to shape really a new model of response in response to acts of violence and hate and vandalism that was occurring in the U.S. at the time, and actually led to the Supreme Court's landmark decision on upholding the Civil Rights Act. And you were intimately involved in that whole process. So could you tell our audience a little bit about that experience?
Sure. It's kind of crazy to think about the fact that history happens to us. We can do all the planning that we want, but when it happens, we don't control what happened. We control our response to it. So back in 1982, which seems like a long time ago, but it actually to me seems like yesterday, there was a march that was planned in Washington, D.C. I was the executive director of a synagogue in suburban Washington, D.C. And the march that was requested by the Klan in Lafayette Park, the permit was turned down. And so there was great upset amongst members of the Klan that they didn't get the chance to voice their hatred. And so what happened was, and I'd like to share with the audience a little bit of the movie-like story that unfolded. What happened was that 8 Klan-related people chose our synagogue, which has white walls around the outside, to do 7-foot-tall murals in red spray paint enamel. That was the slogans of the Waffen SS, in Take a Shower Jew on the nursery school door, the Steel Eagle of the American Nazi Society, and these were done under the cover of darkness. And so we were in the synagogue having a board meeting. that ended at 11 o'clock at night. Nobody knew anything. Nobody heard anything. And this is where the story, I think, gets movie-like and interesting. Sometimes truth is, in fact, stranger than fiction. So one member of our board I knew was a member of the CIA, but no one knew that. When he left the board meeting at 11 o'clock at night, he went out to his car that was not parked in the parking lot. It was parked on the sidewalk. And the car was spray painted with a swastika, and the entire car was defaced with this Klan-related and anti-Semitic graffiti. He came back into my office and he said, "Can I get a secure line? I think I've been exposed." And I gave him a secure line, and then I went outside with our custodian. And I don't know what made me do it, but I said, I think there has to be more. By the way, a full parking lot of cars with the lights shining on, no car was defaced. Nothing was defaced. And so I walked around the building with the custodian. He had his flashlight. There were no lights around. And as we uncovered one by one these slogans, it was frightening, appalling. But how did that happen? So what I didn't mention, it was election eve, 1982. And at 6 a.m. the next morning, we were a polling place. So I knew that when the sun came up, that the news cameras would be there. This would be the billboard of hate for Washington, which in fact it did become. But I said this was a crime against the community, not just a crime against the synagogue. And instead of following what the advice had been, which is if this kind of defacement happens, you should call this sandblasting company. They will come out in the middle of the night and they will take it down. And we don't want to promote crimes of imitation. We don't want to give undue publicity to the perpetrators of this hate. So take it down. And so I convinced in the office between 11 o'clock and midnight, the president of the congregation, this member who was CIA, and we made a unilateral decision not to take it down. But I said, I'll take care of the media. And when they come in the morning, I would like to tell them that this was Tuesday. It was Monday night to Tuesday morning. I said, I'd like to issue an ultimatum to the media and an invitation to the community. The ultimatum to the media was, if you're here now to cover this, then you must come back on Sunday when, led by the children of the community, we're going to take scrub brushes, buckets, and we're going to manually take down the symbols of hate. And we're inviting the entire community. And so that issued the invitation. And on that Sunday, 1,000 people came. It was broadcast Paris Le Monde, in Russia, all over the world. And it created a new model of response. But I don't want to say but from my own background, when I said history happens to us, I believe that true leadership is about honoring history, those who came before us. It is about living in the present moment, but it's also about shaping the future. So what I said was, I don't believe it's adequate to allow the media or in the public eye to decide that this was sufficient to wipe it away. And so we initiated a civil suit against the perpetrators. We put out, and actually people contributed to a witness, a discovery fund, because no one knew who had done this. And that led to the discovery of the perpetrators. And we said we did not want a penny for the synagogue, that 100% of any recovery would go to the Montgomery County, it was Montgomery County, Maryland, the Montgomery County Human Rights Commission, to fund the, I'll just say the court cases or any kind of discovery for other acts of hate-related violence or vandalism. Now, I'm going to be quiet a minute and let you ask me, because you do know the next thing of, was there any personal intrigue to this?
Yeah, that's where I was exactly going to go. Is in our discussions before, you had alluded to that after that event, and you taking a very, I think, a substantial leadership role in how you responded, which I applaud you for the way you crafted that. That you lived under some life and death situations for several years that followed that. And so if you could just kind of share what you went through.
So I want to begin that answer by giving you a compliment. You talked about walking the talk, and I think that the leadership crucible has what I'll call instant street cred, because nobody has greater credibility in talking about leadership than the professional and volunteer firefighters across the United States. And so I just want to tell you how I applaud what you've done, talk about making a difference, and what we had said in a prior conversation, answering the call. When it rings and it's a 3 alarm, it's a 4 alarm. It's not like, no, I think I'll pass on this one. And over time you're lucky to be alive, but you make a difference. So in this case, my view was that, so I had a very visible role because there were press conferences on Capitol Hill and people were following the criminal case. By the way, this became a criminal conviction for the leader, who did 3 years in prison for, it was a crime against property rather than a crime against person. And under the legal statutes, there had never been for 100 years any prison sentence for someone who had defaced a building and a religious institution. So that set a legal precedent. But then the civil case actually went to the Supreme Court, and they upheld all of that. So to the personal, I received, I'll give you an example of a phone call, because there were death threats against me and my family, my children. So I mentioned about it being almost the Hollywood movie kind of thing. So I answered the phone, and my last name is pronounced Levin, and the voice on the other end says, "Is this Mr. Levin?" And I said, "Yes, who's calling?" He said, "Don't make no difference. I'm watching your daughter," and he mispronounced her name, but she's a beautiful little girl, and I'm watching her swing at her nursery school. I said, "Yeah." He said, "I just have one question for you. What is your favorite color? And maybe give me your favorite 3 colors." And I said, "You want to tell me what this is about?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to be sending you some shoe boxes, and each one's going to be wrapped with that color of the ribbon you want, the different body parts of your daughter."
Wow. So yeah. What did you immediately do?
Well, what I said to him might give you a little insight into me, which is, I said, "Come get me. Step out of the shadows. I'm right here. You know where I am. Come get me." And they never did. Just got calls all the time, had to change my phone number over the 5 years. Yeah. So that's what happened. But I believe in you need to be willing to pay the ultimate price. There's no ducking.
When you went through that, how did it change? How did it change your lifestyle for that period of time?
I have to tell you that it didn't. Maybe we're born a certain way. I believe in the strength of core principles, and so I'll tell you a couple of mine because although I've been in different industries and for-profit, non-profit, other things, the thread is a constant one. So the first one is a sense of deep gratitude. I don't think we're promised any number of days on this earth. I don't think we're, I have this whole thing. I wrote a book about it called that speaks about accident of birth. And by that, I don't mean we're born by accident. I mean, it's accident, what family we're born into, what time in history, what country, there but for the grace of God go I, whatever you want to say. So the question is what we do with it. So my view has always been that I want to leave the world a little better place than I found it. And I guess one of the things that is a watchword for me, which I say, and this is a leadership core principle, we have a responsibility for what happens on our watch. And I believe we create a culture, no matter where we are. Leading by example, I think, is critical, but we're judged by our actions more than our words. And so my own view is that what happened in that moment at the synagogue was, some people talk about the aha moment. I call it the tag your it moment. But I believe that tag we're it all the time. And when I said that history happens to us, we can't plan it. You can do all the planning. We should do planning, all of that. But ultimately, whatever happened before to shape us is what really, I believe, our default button is our morality and our principles. So I didn't change anything. I will say, I was flattered when people said, "Oh, you were so brave." And I said, "What was the alternative?" Everybody talks about bravery. It's not bravery. It's not even courage. It's an imperative.
It's just doing the right thing.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, I said, you've heard me say, leave your ego at the door. Those are really nice words. Mine is, I didn't put the defacement up on the synagogue, but I ended up being in a position of decision making where something had to be decided instantly, either call that sandblasting company, which was national policy, or go against it and say, we're not taking it down. That just brushes it under the rug. That makes it disappear. It's not disappearing. Let's use it as, a teachable moment. But I believe it's much more than a teachable moment. And I believe we're judged by our morality is not partisan and it's not political. I believe that it's who we are. So if I was in charge, I wasn't signing on to anything else. And by the way, I did say, if you want to do the other way, you make the call and I resign. So that had a little bit of an impact on the decision.
Well, so it's good to know where your parameters are at too. All right.
Yeah. I said, let me make it easy. Let me make it easy for you.
Yeah. I've often told young chiefs when they call and say, you've done this business a long time, so what am I getting into? And I said, you have to know where your landmarks are on both sides, because you're going to be asked to do things that you may not agree with, and if they're outside of your boundaries, then you have to be willing to put your badge on the table.
I love that. Put your badge on the table. Yep. All right. So I want to use this. We'll probably wrap up this segment. So I want to say something that just occurred to me that this is very true, related to what you just said as well. And it goes like this. I believe that true leadership, when we say lead by example, is to not just do the right thing, but doing the right thing has its own power. I believe that people want to do the right thing. There's a capacity for compassion, and then there's also a capacity for cruelty. Indifference is a nice way to say it, but like inaction versus action. But this is about compassion, reaching out, caring about the others in the community. How would you feel if it happened to you, but it was actually against everybody? It was against the principles that we all believe in. And so I believe that doing the right thing is inspiring. And people talk about an inspirational leader. I believe that with that culture that we talked about, I think there's an organizational culture, there's a corporate culture. It does come from the top. And I believe that it's not just about inspiration, it's about aspiration. So we know that we're talking about ideals and things are going to be imperfect, but just like you said, you got to be ready to put your badge on the table. And I guess the other way to say that is walking the talk, or in business, it's put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
So, part of the money is your salary, your own statement. And I like to use my life to add meaning rather than compromise.
Well, you've definitely done that, and I think your point's well taken. We've got a lot of people today that are, talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. And we need to have more people like you step up and do the right thing.
Thank you, and like you, thank you.
Well, Marshall, as we look at that event, you've kind of went on and had some really interesting jobs in your life, and so let's talk a little bit about that. You've worked in both the profit and nonprofit sectors. You actually have, I understand, raised over $1 billion for various charities throughout your work.
You said with a B, right?
A billion, right? Yeah. So, which is just, I just can't even fathom that. But
I can't either.
So just tell us a little bit about, some of that work and, how that's kind of how you have, just kind of your experience there.
Okay. So I spent the beginning of my career on what I'll call the planning and budgeting side of things versus the fundraising side. And in the nonprofit field, was much more involved in overseeing social services, impact on clients, the capacity for providing care with, in major systems. And then I ended up creating a national education company that for 5 years had me in schools across the country and school systems and raising venture capital. And when I finished that, I decided to come back into the nonprofit world, but found out that maybe I was the only person who had started out in nonprofit on the other side of the table and then had come back to raising a different kind of money. It wasn't for nonprofit, it was for-profit investment and the return and the shareholders and everybody else. And so when I said I was coming back, I was given opportunities to head up the major gifts I moved to the New York area, and so was involved in the fundraising side for the Federation of New York City, the Anti-Defamation League, which tied back a little bit to what we talked about before, that piece of my background, was in charge of the country, and then the Weizmann Institute of Science, which is, I'll just say that 7 out of the 25 top drugs in the world have come from Weizmann research, but Weizmann does not have applied research. It's just unlocking the secrets of nature, and it's basic research, fundamental research. But I headed up that enterprise across the United States and assisted with global partnerships for more than a decade. So that was part of that background, and it led to the B word, which, what do you say? A marathon begins one step at a time. Yeah. So, there was never that kind of a measuring by monetary goal, but there was every year. I mean, it was held accountable, but I never imagined to have that kind of a monetary impact. I've always thought about the human impact. One thing I'll say about the Weizmann research is because the DNA of all human beings is 99 point whatever the same, that a breakthrough anywhere is a breakthrough everywhere. And so the slogan of the Weizmann Institute is science for the benefit of humanity. And I love the idea that it cut across all geographic, gender, political, boundaries. And that felt great and feels great. So that was it.
Yeah, it's just a tremendous accomplishment, but also just the impact that you have made through raising that money and just making a difference in the lives of so many people. I mean, you'll never know the number that you've touched.
Well, thank you, but I don't say this as gratuitously deflecting the praise. Thank you for that, but it really is working with great people for meaningful, high impact organizations, and all those people sharing that. That's always been my philosophy, but that's not just words. It's really true. It's wanting to make everybody share in the success, and no one part or role is more important than another, and I truly believe that.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Crucible podcast. If you have a story of adversity you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. Visit us at theleadershipcruciblepodcast.com and join us next time as we continue to explore how to live lives of success and significance.